Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us from wherever you are in the world. My name is Gabriela Mocan. I'm a cultural producer, academic, president of the Arts and Cultural Management Conference, and your host for this afternoon. Today's event, which is sure to be a mind and soul-stirring conversation, marks the launch of this year's ACMC program. ACMC is the Arts and Cultural Management Conference, as you might all know already. Set up 7 years ago, the Arts and Cultural Management Conference is a year-round project culminating in the actual Vienna-anchored conference, which aims to empower the younger generations animating the creative sector. It brings together artists, cultural practitioners, scholars, and researchers, and fosters a stimulating and cross-disciplinary dialogue on current matters. I'd like to thank my team for putting this together, the ACMC board and lead coordinator, Emma Gabor, and especially our colleague, Briar Holt, for waking up in the middle of the night in Melbourne to run the tech and communications backstage. For today's event, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome in the midst of our community two remarkable thinkers, Bayo Akomolafe and Nick Hunt. For many of you, they might not require any sort of introduction. I'm absolutely sure about that, but I would still want to highlight a few things. Bayo Akomolafe is a renowned philosopher, writer, activist, professor of psychology, and executive director of the Emergence Network. Well known for his profound insights into contemporary issues and his transformative approach to challenging conventional narratives, his work invites us to reconsider our relationship with the world and to embrace new ways of thinking and being. Nick Hunt is an accomplished writer, editor, storyteller, and adventurer whose books and articles offer captivating explorations and landscapes, cultures, and the human experience. His journeys across Europe and beyond have inspired many to look at the world through a different lens, appreciating the beauty and complexity of our environment. I must make a very short confession before starting. I never had the opportunity to meet Bayo Akomolafe, and it is a great honor for me to meet him today and to welcome him to be a part of this event and our community. I was always inspired by Bayo's work. I did meet Nick Hunt a few years ago. We worked together on an event in London, and same as with Bayo, Nick has been a constant source of inspiration for me. So it is a real joy to be here in discussion, in conversation with both of you. Before we begin, I would just want to say that I am encouraging all of you to prepare your questions and send them to us in chat. We are going to open the floor for questions at the end of the event, and our colleague Briar is going to be looking forward to your questions. And also, I just want to point out that the event is recorded, and we are going to upload it in case you will want to watch it again at the end of our event in a couple of days. So welcome again, everyone, and I would like to welcome Bayo Akomolafe and Nick Hunt, who are joining us from the United States and from England, from Bristol, I think. And Bayo is in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, correct. And I have come to the room, as I was saying earlier, from my hometown in Transylvania, the land of vampires. So welcome everyone. As you all know, probably the topic of our conference this year is transgression and collaboration. And I would very much want to invite both of you, Bayo and Nick, to reflect a little bit on these two terms, because I feel very much that your very existence in this world and of course your work is very much centered on these two concepts. Transgression, you're very much pushing boundaries through the work you do, through the way you're being and inspiring us. And of course, you're also cherishing and nurturing, why not, collaboration and community. Would you like to share a few things with us regarding what you believe to be the mission in all the work you do, and what is the relevance of these two concepts?
Thank you, Bayo, and thank you, Gabriela. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. It seems like we're here from all over the place, all over the world. And what a lovely introduction. It's a surprise sometimes to realize that you are doing this work. Sometimes it takes someone else to point it out. I don't necessarily think of myself as being deeply engaged in transgression and collaboration, and it was really this invitation from Gabriela that made me think about what I do and what I've done through these lenses, and realize that yes, that is what I do. So it's been, you know, a pleasant surprise to kind of have it framed in that way. I mean, maybe I'll just explain the main work I do is two things really, and they speak to both of those themes. I say I'm a travel writer. It's not a term that is perfect, and lots of travel writers don't like being called that because of various kind of connotations it might have. But the work I do is deeply informed by travel. That's what gives me inspiration to write, and it's what I use really as a tool of investigation to explore the world and to learn. And the way I do it is through walking, mainly long walking journeys, mainly in Europe. Simply because I haven't found anything else that seems such an effective way into the world. And this idea of going into the world feels like one of the first transgressions, perhaps. We're so used to kind of thinking of ourselves as individual units moving about the place, self-absorbed. And it's really my experiences in mountains, you know, by rivers, in forests, often being lost, and with the, you know, the mild fear that engenders, quite a useful kind of creative tool sometimes being lost. But that's when I feel myself kind of transgressing, I suppose, slipping into the wider world, whether you want to call that the environment, nature, you know, some kind of spirit. It's those moments that you can kind of feel the borders collapsing slightly. And I know Bayo's work is all about that. But that I've kind of learned it not through thinking about it, but by experiencing it, walking, getting lost, getting tired, and just having those little glimpses that I'm sure people here will know, when beauty and awe and the sublime kind of hits you in the face unexpectedly. So my work really has been a process of trying to work out what to do with that. And I still don't know. Often I find these moments quite terrifying because they ask so much of you if you take them seriously. You know, it's easy to take a picture of something, and I think that's the way that many people, myself included, sometimes try to engage with, you know, the bigness, the hugeness of everything. It's a way literally of capturing it, kind of making it containable. But I don't know how to contain it. I don't know if it should be contained. I don't even know quite what it is, this great mystery. but those are the moments that, yeah, I do feel this kind of transgressive sense coming in. And then just very briefly, before we hear from Bayo, the other side of this that I'd like to explore as well, the collaboration. There's often a writer, an idea that writers have of themselves, especially when they're young, that they are kind of visionary antennae channeling genius from nothing, you know, from the heavens, and then writing it all out on their own and then throwing it into the world. I probably was guilty of that as well. But the more I work with others and the older I get, the more interested I am in being enmeshed in many other things and people and minds and voices. Of course, when you write a book, you know, it's not just me, it's the world and it's the people I meet. It's the collaborative process, including with other people, editing, producing, engaging with the work I do. And I'm also one connection I have to Bayo comes through my work as an editor for something called the Dark Mountain Project, which is a very collaborative network of writers, thinkers, artists, all kinds of people engaged in kind of deep questions about the environment, ecology, where we are, crisis, change. And this has been such an intensely communal network that I've been part of, that it's really made me understand collaboration, you know, and not this idea of the kind of the single genius standing on a mountaintop, you know, screaming at the sky. It's really about the village below the mountain and the way you relate to the people in that village. So some thoughts off the top of my head. And Bayo, do you want to come in?
Yeah, brother, thank you so much for. I like the phrase "getting lost and getting tired." That should be your new book. Getting lost and getting tired. I really like that.
Well, I have a terrible sense of direction. For a travel writer, I get lost constantly. I've got no intuitive sense of where I am, so I do get lost by accident
Well,
often.
maybe that's the point, brother. Maybe that's the gift of travel. Maybe we're too found. Maybe we are too situated. We're too locked in place. We're too settled. And the traveler is the exquisite vocation of becoming lost and knowing the world in different ways. And maybe that's how I want to come in, you know, that idea of getting lost. And so I grew up in a very um, Christian world, in a very Christian environment. I grew up in the Pentecostal, charismatic, Bible thumping, devil chasing, Holy Ghost jiving world of southern Nigeria. And basically went to church Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and sometimes on Sundays. um, and I remember my one true ontological vocation was trying to understand the nature of sin. Because this is what our um, evangelical leaders tried to drill into us, that you know, you ought to be cautious and careful about your faith, because when the rapture sounds, will you be found wanting? This was my teenage years, spent anxious about if I was going to float, if I was eventually going to float into the heavens eventually. And so I applied my nerdish head to trying to understand the the notion of sin. I came across this word. It's Greek. It's called hamartia, Hamartia. It's in the book of Romans somewhere, where it says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, something like that. It's the word used is Greek. It's hamartia, and hamartia means to miss the mark, right? Yeah, if you can picture the image of an archer, you know, aiming and it just falls slightly below the bullseye. That is sin, right? And that was my one true teenage ontological vocation, not parties, not anything like that. It was just this notion of transgression, and that I was uniquely, individually, in a separate and separable way, responsible for sin. And I was contributing to a world of sin, right? It took me many years to get lost from that holding pattern. It took me many years, many nights of work, many walks like you, brother Nick, into forests and empty places. It took me lots of conversations to notice that transgression, as I've been trained to think about it, isn't some individual burden. It is the utter creativity of the world. It is how the world constantly spills away from itself, from its own marks. It's not some individual thing, right? The modern civilization, it tries again and again, persists, in trying to reduce the creativity, the promiscuity of the world into the isolated self, the I that is stable. But the I that is stable is just a snapshot. The I that is complete and immobile is just a snapshot of a rushing, fierce, stream of water. And I started to see transgression as a post-humanist, excuse me, a post-humanist vocation, something wondrous, something fierce, something that often compels us to pathologize the world, to think of it as manageable, and then to see ourselves as managers or curators of the universe, right? So in a very strange plot twist, I see transgression as an invitation to collaboration, right? Right. Collaboration for me is not just two separate individuals coming together or two separate collectives. Collaboration speaks about the interaction. Notice I didn't say interaction. I'm using Karen Barad's deployment and conceptualization of the term interaction. That is, boundaries do not pre-exist relationships. It is within relationships that boundaries emerge, right? Between us right now, it might seem as if Nick and Bayo are separate. We are different, but our difference comes within our relationship, not prior to it. We don't come with steady boundaries. Even boundaries are trafficking, are porous. We're not impervious, we're exposed. So collaboration becomes this orgasmic invitation to not to the individual. It's something we're already enlisted by, forces beyond our ken. We're constantly and spirited away. I heard another voice.
Collaborating. There's another collaborator.
Collaboration. It's the intrusion of voices you don't account for. It's how the world constantly upends itself. So transgression, collaboration, two polar ends of a spectrum? Not at all. I see transgression as how the world collaborates with its own self to know itself in different ways, and how to miss the mark, to lose one's way, is probably the last freedom, the last conspiratorial freedom of us gestating in modern civilization.
This is so beautiful, Bayo, and I was thinking about the title that we have for our event, Togetherness as Becoming. So it goes back to what you have just said, creating a joint identity in a way, despite our boundaries, despite all our differences, we become together. And our whole existence is a becoming. In fact, it's nothing stable about our own identity. So it's a journey all our lives.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because after thinking very much about this event and feeling deeply that it's going to be a perfect match between the two of you through the way you are and through the work you do. I came to the realization that you are both involved in projects that have a central symbol, and that is the mountain. Nick, you already mentioned your project, the Dark Mountain Project. Bayo, you are the leader of a project, course, festival entitled We Will Dance with the Mountains, which I am very much drawn to and I very much hope to be a part of in the future. And thinking about Hermann Hesse, who wrote a beautiful essay entitled What Trees Teach Us About Belonging and Life, I wanted to paraphrase him and ask you, what do mountains teach us about belonging and life? And what is the role of the mountain in this? You mentioned this briefly, Nick, but of course, you also recently traveled to Colombia, trying to climb the mountains there. For you, Bayo, the mountains, I'm sure, have a very central place in your work. So can we maybe talk about this a bit?
Well, they're powerful places, mountains.
Yeah.
In Colombia, slight correction, what I was writing about was not climbing the mountains, because the area that I was drawn to the base of, some people might have heard of, the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, in northern Colombia on the Caribbean coast, the highest coastal mountain range on Earth, coming straight out from the sea like a great pyramid with glaciers on top, despite the tropical heat at sea level. And this is where various people live, but most famously the Kogi people, who have been there in a culture that was really never colonized, even though the Spanish first landed kind of 50 miles away. They never got into these mountains. They never realized there were people there, and they were just sort of left alone. And without kind of going too deeply into it now, they've made it very clear they don't want people to go there. Outsiders are not welcome for very sensible and decent reasons. So talking about transgression, I didn't go into the mountains, and not climbing them and not exploring and not kind of, adventuring and all these things that there's so much kind of pressure to do, was a kind of fascinating thing, that the kind of encounter with respecting a boundary, was the thing that I ended up writing about. The mountains there are known as the heart of the world, or that's how one kind of translation of their name. And of course, transgressively, I wanted to go to the heart of the world. Who wouldn't? A place that claims to have deep ecological knowledge and understanding and connection with the earth. And of course I was drawn there because who wouldn't want to kind of explore such a place and kind of gain this knowledge? I mean, I'm talking in very naive terms, but that's how it's often framed, right? The explorer comes from outside, braves the wilds, finds the knowledge, extracts the knowledge, takes it back. And it was made very clear to me that, that wasn't an option here. So being at the base of the mountain was actually very valuable. There's another writer that people might know, Nan Shepherd, wonderful Scottish nature writer, and she said about the Cairngorms, to get to the top is not the only way to climb a mountain. Yeah. The top isn't the point. The point is the mountain. It's not you on top of the mountain, on top of the pyramid at the apex. And this other thing that I mentioned, Dark Mountain, it's a project that wasn't started by myself. It was started by two English writers, Dougald Hine and Paul Kingsnorth, who are both no longer involved with the project, but they're the ones that launched it. And the image, you know, mountains are such a powerful image. The image of the dark mountain came from a poem by the American poet Robinson Jeffers. The dream led masses coming down the dark mountain, and to Paul and Dugald, what they saw in that image was the mountain as a place not of escape, not of running away, but of retreat, of stepping back, a point of high ground to look back and see where you've come from and see where you're going, a way of stepping outside, you know, the noise and the shouting of the city, of media, of culture, of everybody having an opinion and coming up with a solution. And what Dark Mountain exists to do is kind of create and hold a space that is not activist. It is not requiring people to tell people what to do, to know the solutions, even though they might do that in other aspects of their lives, and many activists do work with us. But to have a space that you can just step out of that and engage honestly with what's happening on the earth at the moment, whether that is grief, whether that is anger, whether that is joy, you know, whatever comes out of it. And people have found that very valuable, I think, just to have that space. So the kind of image of the mountain exists as this place that you can step into. But you can't live on the mountain. You know, people don't stay on the mountain. They have to come down at some point, most people. And I think, again, that image of return is very important, that we all live, as we're talking about, collaboratively. You know, we're part of a community. And that's where the real work is, you know, stepping away into the wilds is really quite easy. I've always found it quite easy. It's irresponsible in the most glorious way, and I love doing it. You know, I love being out on my own remote when no one can get to me, and I don't have to worry about anyone else or their feelings or how I'm beholden to them. You know, it's a wonderful space to be in, but I'm not able to live there. You know, it's always about the coming back.
Sorry, related to what you just said, Nick, I was very much asking myself, what is the exact meaning of this project, which Bayo is involved in and has created. It is these challenges that the mountains pose, and still I think Bayo has the secret of teaching us how to dance with these mountains, because it's
absolutely not. I'm just enjoying listening to my brother Nick. And maybe I'll just take a few steps back and say, you know, it's about identity. There's some unfinished thought about identity that I need to stress, that it's not the matter of it's not a matter of saying it's not that we have joint identities per se. It's that identity itself is a distraction, right? That every time that identity is some kind of thermal grip, right? It's a kind of capture, right? Every time we commit to identity, which is not to be pathologized or dismissed or rendered evil or inadequate, but every time we commit to it, there are stunning risks involved, right? There are exclusionary risks and dynamics that are immediately kicked, you know, or operationalized. It's like I said, it's like taking a picture of a river and then seeking to identify the river through its properties from the photograph you have. And it's a distraction from the river and its ongoing dynamic. Maybe in that same way, mountains defeat me, right? There's something about the mountains for me, and I don't have climbing experiences like Nick. I've been on some mountains, but like Nick brilliantly said, the thing for me isn't to climb the mountain or to conquer it or to do a Sylvester Stallone Rocky pose on top of one. You know, that is not the thing for me. The thing for me is to be in awe. There's something very spiritual about mountains. My family and I went to the Niagara Falls 3-4 days ago, and we took this boat called the Maid of the Mist, and it took us just to the watery, frothing, explosive edge of a part of the falls, and I remember muttering to myself, we couldn't have done this. And by we, I'm speaking about humans, that we couldn't have invented this. You know, there's something really stifling about built environments for me. When I look across the landscape and it's flat and it's only our achievements that I can put my finger on, even though our achievements are not quite ours, but that's a different conversation. There's something about the mountain that speaks of a different temporality, right? That mountains are actually amazingly exotic dancers. They're not as stable as we think they are. They move. They just move at a different pace than we do. And so the idea of dancing with mountains for me is an idea of not just slowing down, but meeting and collaborating with the more than human. That maybe the anxieties of our time around belonging, who belongs and who doesn't belong, around politics, climate anxieties, all of those anxieties are secreted from the positionality we sustain and persist in maintaining with the so-called natural world. And so Dancing with Mountains is fugitive work. It is getting lost. It is allowing perception, which is never internal. Perception is not something that happens within. Perception speaks to the threads and the webs of collaboration and living together with that make our bodies and our lives and our worlds possible. So yeah, that's what I think about mountains. I think about Rilke, right? the beautiful thing, and I'm paraphrasing now, about the man who gets defeated again and again is that that man is afforded new glimpses of new kinds of worlds, not worlds in terms of distance, but worlds in terms of the queer norm, the queer normal, the strange present, the immediate that isn't available to our senses. Yeah, I'll stop there.
That reminds me, Bayo, just I was catching up with some of your writing over the past couple of days, and I wrote something down because it really spoke to me. Have you ever tried standing perfectly still? If you do, you might notice you're actually moving in barely perceptible ways, leaning back and forth, vibing in the minor key. And this makes me think of mountains and that kind of sense of stillness that is anything but still. You know, we make the mistake of seeing something that's moving on a different scale and it seems inert and immobile. And it reminded me also of the writer David Abram, in one of his books, had a description, and I'm paraphrasing here, of seeing a rock and somebody commenting that that rock was still and not moving. But then he gets into the molecular level and it kind of says, do you realize what extraordinary energy is happening right there? Those molecules that have been clinging together for hundreds of thousands of years. Like, that's an intense energetic process just to remain, to be still, to be constant, to be present.
Yes. I mean, it takes a lot of motion for stillness to happen, doesn't it? Right. And it seems mountains are monuments to the world's transgression of its own self and its own mark, right? That sin isn't something that happens once in a while. Transgression isn't something that happens once in a while. Transgression is the undercurrent of everything. Maybe it's not even mountains that dance. Maybe it's the stuff of everything that we rudely call nature or reality that dances, and the footsteps is what we call a mountain, right? There's this beautiful story that I learned about in Estonia about the god, the grandfather god who created the world, and he created it flat. And the trickster in that cosmology, whose name is Vanapagan, I think, the trickster strikes a deal with the grandfather god, right? Estonia being this very paganistic country, probably the most animist that I've been to in Europe. The grandfather god gets on one end. I think the deal is that they would stretch this flatness out, maybe in something that is reminiscent of the exploding Big Bang model, you know, the universe that is expanding outer and outer into nothingness, right? So they stretch this thin line, except that's not what happens. You know, Vanapagan gets on the other end of the spectrum and pushes the line into itself instead of stretching it out, right? And because he does that, mountains and valleys and all of that, all the ecologies that we resemble and we name come from that transgressive act, right? And life becomes possible because of transgression. I think mountains are signs that the world is uneven, and that maybe the math, the logic, the algorithms of progress that have been calculated through our ideas of collaboration, which is almost entirely transactional, need to shift. We can move into different forms of collaboration that don't know the future, that aren't about getting from point A to point Z, but is about losing our way and getting tired.
Wow, yes, this is very powerful. And if we think about creation, talking about God, going back to what you mentioned earlier, Bayo, all creation is in a way or another transgression, I feel.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you to think, and I would like us to think now a little bit about the concept of culture, because we are looking at culture as maybe something that can save us in this mad world we are living in. There are more and more boundaries that feed into our ideas of belonging and identity, as we said, and these boundaries simply make it all so much more confusing for us these days. So where does culture come into the picture, and how can it help us survive?
You want to go, Nick?
You go.
Okay. It used to be that when we thought about culture, we were speaking about a sociality, a way of life of a people, right? It's sociology 101, right? It's the way that we think about how we make life, how we organize sensibilities, how we language the world. Again, how we story our origins, our destinies, our futures, our technologies. It always starts from the we. I'm very interested in the ways that very current insights in feminist, new materialist, post-humanist traditions disrupt that idea of culture. Because if it's how we organize life, we're noticing in small doses, and maybe not so small doses, that we are also organized by the things we organize, which already lends itself to some kind of paradoxical situation, because it's culture can no longer then be distinguished from nature, right? The age-old conversation is, here's what nature is, and here's where culture is, and the twain shall never meet. And now we have clunky, unwieldy contraptions and words like nature culture, right, in the literature, because there's this attempt to struggle with where to situate the boundary, right? If it is the case that our modern civilization and its anthropogenic, secretions is changing the environment, right? One example of how that is affecting us in return, there are myriad examples, but I read recently about a longitudinal study that examined the ways our brains, have shrunk during hot periods in our collective history. That is, our brains get smaller when the world gets hotter, in a sense. And that affects everything. It affects our perceptual, visual, aesthetic, moral, ethical, ontological landscapes. It affects everything. So maybe culture has been nature all along. Maybe nature has been culture all along. Maybe the idea that we are supreme, distinguished from the environment, is being called into question with the emergent properties and dynamics and events of today. And I'll just leave it at that because I know we have some time to take questions. Pass it to Nick.
Yeah, well, I just thank you for, I never did Sociology 101, so I was really struggling with the abstract noun and thinking, what is culture? So I'm glad that you provided a definition and a starting point. But I could just completely concur. I think that collapse between the forced division between nature and culture, human, animal, us and the world, increasingly just doesn't feel like it makes any sense. It feels like a bit of a relic, thinking of things in those terms.
Yeah.
And I think just the more you learn of how absolutely enmeshed we all are in everything else, culture doesn't really seem like a separate force, in the way it's often presented, like kind of one of the bodies of the state. You get culture as a kind of block that stands alone from other occupations, and it seems crazy because humans have never been divided that way, and animals, have culture. I look at my dog, he's got a culture. He clearly operates through kind of cultural means that he understands and are related to the world around him. So it feels, transgressive in a very liberating way, actually, thinking that culture is not separate from other things.
Yeah.
And it does feel kind of on a gut level that is a way forward into whatever's coming, a world in which people's brains are shrinking because it's getting hotter, which is, thanks, Bayo, that's like the latest terrifying thing that I'll I'll have in my head.
Before we open the floor for questions, and I really hope that there will be many questions. I'm sure everybody got quite inspired already by everything you two have shared. I would just want to invite you to leave a word of encouragement from, as you said, Nick, earlier, the heart of the world, from your hearts to our hearts, to the young community that our project is basically surrounded by and working with and encouraging. It is mostly challenging for the younger generations, I believe, to survive these times and to find their ways by getting lost. And I would want to leave them with a word from you. What do you think would be important for them to take with them from this meeting and from what you would like to share with them?
Well, I'd say, coming back to where we started, really, that idea of getting lost. I'd say as a general encouragement, it feels like people are, I mean, I feel like talking of the younger generation, there's a kind of expectation now that you will have the solutions, which is possibly, possibly true, but also quite unhelpful, I'd imagine, if you're being looked at to kind of come up with solutions that other people seem to have failed to arrive at. It's a very difficult space, but an interesting one, and I think a one of learning, in which you're not expected to arrive at a solution, to know the answer, to reach the destination. And it's it's a constant kind of juggling as well, because I know things are urgent and do require things being done now. But again, something else Bayo has said, which I think was one of the first things, the first sort of phrases that I heard that kind of filtered down through whatever social media, that really struck me. Times are urgent, let's slow down, which feels like a kind of heresy in the times we live in. In a time when we are told we're in this climate emergency, when we have to act now, that we have X amount of years to save the world, and it's so kind of time limited, and the impetus is for speed, 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 action, let's do this now. So to be told, let's slow down, as a walker, that really spoke to me, because some of the most valuable times I've had in my life, and the whatever insights I've had have normally come when I'm being very slow and not expecting to arrive somewhere, not expecting to find the answer. So I just say, try not to be too uncomfortable with that space of not knowing, because I suspect that answers do come from the margins and the peripheries and the shadowy places where we're not expecting to find them. And if you focus tunnel visioned on a kind of certain point, you don't see what's around you. You can't see that periphery. And for me, at least, that's where the interesting things have always kind of crept in.
Well, brother, I just want to say that it'll be a great privilege of mine to walk with you sometime in the future, and not too distant, I hope, to just thank you for that beautiful vocation and sharing it with us. And I hope we have the chance to actually walk together one of these days. I think walking is, how people say we ought to read between the lines or think between the lines. I think walking is some kind of thinking across the lines. And I think that's more transgressive than just staying between. Something about it that calls to steady, or rather unsteady vocation with failure. And like Brian Masumi says, walking is the artful style of falling, or it's falling with style, right? Every time you dislodge your stability, you're trusting the planet to hold your gravity. You stick out one foot and it's falling with style. It's artful falling with style. I'm just going to say about courage that I'm constantly intrigued by the ways that well, not constantly, but sometimes intrigued by the ways that we think about courage as a positive thing, right? So when people are invited to encourage, it's usually to offer positive words or positive frameworks. I think of courage as proximity to the heart. And I think of the heart of the matter not as some central pulsing unit, but as the feral somewheres and somethings that stream through the world, right? The feralities, the impossibilities, the desires that are inviting us to fall to our feet or to fall to the ground. So that to encourage, for me, is to draw attention and to sensitize people to the ways that we are being called to spaces of deep, sonorous, sensuous solidarities and collaborations, right? So my form of encouraging is not to say everything's going to be well. I know we need that sometimes, or to say you can do it, you know, or you can make it if you try, or something like that. My form of encouragement is to say that the notions and the images of courage we've been so affixed to, you know, of the hero rushing headlong to the dragon with a sword outstretched, you know, needs to give way to a notion of courage as failure, as tears, as knowing we cannot do this except with each other. And that's how I want to leave my words of encouragement. We are failing and we're falling apart together, and that is miraculous.
And as you said in your letters to your daughter, I love that very much. You said that if we do not leave our homes, whatever home can mean, it can even mean our comfort zones, our known reality, the home will eventually leave us. So this goes back to urging the younger generations to have the courage to fall and to leave home.
You write that down.
You wrote that.
I know.
And I loved that. It really touched me. And I was even thinking about Nick, who was saying that he's always looking for something that's outside of home. That's where the treasure is, but he's bringing the treasure back home. And I was thinking about home very much, reading what the two of you wrote about this. So I think we are all extremely lucky to have you here with us and to receive this energy, because it's pure energy that will help us continue the journey. And with this, I just want to open it to everybody who is with us here in the room to ask questions. It would be lovely to hear some questions from you. And maybe we can see everyone. Can we switch to gallery view? So would anybody wish to ask anything? Don't be shy. It was so dense, and I'm sure everybody's deep in thoughts. If not, I would like to ask you, going back to your daughter, Bayo, because I know you have a very special relationship with your children, both children. But of course, you wrote the book, the letters to your daughter, Nick. You have your dog who is so like a child. I know, being a mom of a dog, I know that the dog is also very much like a child. And how do you see your place in the world alongside the place of your daughter, Bayo? Because your daughter is obviously the new generation, the younger generation. What do you feel she needs to know, other than having the courage to fall? And just very quickly, I will take 2 minutes to actually read a very nice quote from French poet Rimbaud. I feel it connects really well to what we spoke about. He said, "To arrive at the unknown through the disordering of all the senses, that's the point. The suffering will be tremendous, but one must be strong, must be born a poet."
The disordering of the senses. Yeah, right. Yesterday was my daughter's birthday, and she became 11 years old yesterday, and we had a great time together with her friends, the whole family, some other families as well. And I sense again and again that I'm not sure that the vocation of parenting is as tried and true as age-old wisdoms tell us they are, or it is. That something about my wife has a word, she coined it, she calls it transparenting. And she means by that we can no longer depend on the verticality of parenting. There's this biblical passage that says, train your child in a way that it should go, and when the child is old, the child will not depart from it. Something like that. It's something about the horizontality of parenting that invites us to notice that we are intergenerational, molecular, fungal, microbial, ecological, aesthetic, spiritual vectors. And we're still learning the lessons as we go. So there's a sense in which my child is my mother, and we're learning together how to fail together. I'll just leave it at that because of time. I do have to jump and fly and save the day somewhere else with my S symbol here.
Nick, if you want to add a last thought. Sorry. Yeah.
I think I was muted because I was producing some kind of feedback, but hopefully that has gone away now. Well, just, as a last thought, I don't have any, there's always a kind of feeling like you have to sum things up, and I certainly can't with that conversation and the kind of vibrancy and aliveness of all these ideas. I kind of feel it more like not a sort of conclusion that we've arrived at, but it feels like a good interweaving of energy. So just thank you for this invitation to be here. And Bayo, it was a real great pleasure to meet you face to face, just about. And I would love to go on a walk with you sometime. Yeah, when we happen to be on the same continent, hopefully sometime not too long in the future. And Gabriela, same goes to you. In fact, let's do it in Transylvania. It's a place that is very dear to my heart. When I walked through Europe, going through Romania was somewhere that was just, deeply special place. So maybe we can meet up there sometime.
It would be lovely. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Bayo, to both of you. Do think about us when you two are going to go on a walk together. Send us a vibe from the mountains, the plains, the fields that you'll be crossing, the wildflower meadows, why not? And thank you so much again to both of you. Thank you to all of you who joined us today. I'm sure you will leave inspired, and we look forward to seeing you at our next events. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.